New to the game? Well, I've got some tips for you. Hello, everyone. Bront CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and we are here to do some new player tips. So going into 2025, we're at the end of 2024 right now. The game has certainly changed quite a bit, so I wanted to do a bit of a new player guide for those of you that might just be starting, or for those of you that are actually looking to start a second account, maybe a new free-to-play account. That quite often happens around this time of year. So let's go take a look at some of the things that you can do to make your account great in 2025. First of all, you're going to need to choose your starter, and I highly recommend you start with Kale. Now, there are some people that debate whether or not Kale or Elhain is better. The reason I like Kale better is Kale has poisons, and he has more poisons, which are very valuable for the clan boss and for dragon, which are the two places that you are going to be farming early. He also can sometimes get some additional turn meter if he kills enemies, which is something the other ones don't always get. He does have the extra 15% chance to critical hit as well, and overall he's got the same aura as the other champions. He's got a good, this is a decent multi-hitter, which could be useful in Fire Knight possibly. So overall, he's got a very, very interesting kit. However, if we go with Elhain, who is in the High Elves, Elhain has an AoE that's a double hitter, and then she has a single attack that then does an AoE on everybody else. And it's not bad. It does a decent amount of damage. It might even hit a little bit harder than Kale's do between the two of them combined. But you don't have any poisons. You cannot get this better than a 4-turn cooldown versus Kale's 3-turn cooldown that starts as a 3-turn cooldown. And this is, of course, is a 3-turn cooldown AoE as well. So you've got two different AoEs. They're not horrible. And then you've got the AoE here that places an extra hit if this attack is critical. So Elhain can probably do a little more raw damage, but Kale is probably a more flexible champion. And to be fair, you want a flexible champion early on because you do not want to invest in multiple champions. As far as Galek and Aethel, honestly, they're both not particularly great. Aethel self-buffs a bit, but even with the self-buff, she doesn't do as much damage as she could otherwise, and if she's not self-buffing because she's cleared it out from the previous mission, then she's actually kind of underwhelming on damage, and Galek just doesn't have a particularly great kit. The small version of decreased defense that is uncontrollable and hard to put out doesn't really translate particularly well. So if you're not going to do Kale, I would recommend Elhain. And to be fair, as much as I'm trash talking all of these starters, any single one of these starters will be a good champion for you for quite a while for campaign farming. So if you picked the wrong one, don't worry too much. So early on, you're going to get a ton of gear and not know what to do with it. Don't invest in bad gear. In general, you are really not going to worry too much about having 1-star or 2-star stuff. Now, I've put some on Rector Draft here for a quest, but otherwise, anything that's 1-star and 2-star, I am immediately selling because it's not worth even using. And this 3-star stuff that I've got here on Kale, well, you get a bunch of it for finishing campaign early on or finishing one part of campaign, and it was better than absolutely nothing. Now, if you get starter lifesteal gear, which you can get during the normal login, the starter lifesteal gear is actually very, very good. It's actually tailor-made with specific stats and substats. It's generally 4-star, or I think a couple pieces are even 5-star. They are some of the best pieces you will get in the game. Put them on your starter, or put them on another champion that you might get as well. In this case, we have a Skeletor chase. So the Skeletor chase has overridden the basic lifesteal gear. So as a result, I've got a bunch of lifesteal gear that I got from something else. So you want to invest in good gear, however. Other things you're going to want to be aware of is early on, you might find these flat attack pieces, flat HP, flat defense, and by flat, I mean there's not a percentage like the percentages down here. And specifically, we are talking about the bottom 3 pieces with flat stats here. Your weapon here is always going to be flat attack, your helmet's always going to be flat HP, and your shield is always going to mean flat defense. So flat stats, we are talking about specifically the bottom pieces. These pieces will be usable very early on, especially if they are 5 and 6 stars early on. But overall, you're going to want percentage stats over flat stats. Specifically, it is going to be a huge difference between a percentage stat and a flat stat of the same rarity. That is why I say 5 and 6 star flat stats could be useful early on for some champions, but are not going to be things you're going to want to invest in heavily or use late. Other things you want to be aware of is boots can have all kinds of different stats and substats. Specifically, though, they are the only places that can have speed as a main stat. You want speed on main stats for your boots in as many boots as possible. Now, these happen to have speed as a substat, and I don't have better boots at the moment, but I can tell you right now that the moment I get speed boots that I can replace these with, these boots are coming off and speed boots are going on. That will help speed your champions up, and speed is one of the most important stats early on in the game because speed will keep you taking turns, and especially if you have lifesteal gear on or other ways to heal yourself, taking more turns means you will not only heal, but you will kill enemies eventually before they get a chance to take a turn. So overall, speed boots, speed boots, speed boots. Finally, for damage dealers, again, I didn't have an option because I don't have a lot of gear at the moment, but crit rate gloves are going to be what you want on your damage dealers, specifically your campaign farmers. So this account, I've got a Sun Wukong. So Sun Wukong is probably going to be my campaign farmer because long-term he'll be a good campaign farmer and a damage dealer. But I could certainly build Kale as that campaign farmer as well, and I'll probably still want to build Kale as some kind of campaign farmer anyway. And for both of them, I'm going to want crit rate gloves early on. For Kale, you only need to get to 85% crit rate to get a 100% chance to crit on his AoE. And the 100% chance makes it the most reliable it can be. And reliability means when you're going to run the same piece of content 5, 10, 20, 40, 80 times in a row, you want that reliability, and any chance to fail to critical hit is going to be a chance to not actually kill something, which is a chance that you could instead die. So you want to get close to 100% crit rate, 85 for the starters because the starters have a special ability to get an additional 15% crit rate. But for Monkey King, I'm going to be looking to get as close to 100% as I possibly can. And finally, lifesteal gear is very important. When you can't heal yourself otherwise, lifesteal gear will keep your nukers alive while they're doing damage, and that can make a big difference in campaign farming as well. You want to make sure you use your resources very well. One of the first things you should do when starting a new account is check for promo codes. And specifically, I've used a promo code here, so I can't do it in this particular account, but Monkey King currently works, and that will give you a Sun Wukong, who is a legendary champion and a great champion to start out with. He can be a nuker, he can be a debuffer, he is very flexible for a long time, he will help you in arena, and early on, he can be a campaign farmer, and he already starts at 5 stars, making a lot of the campaign much easier for you to use him as a campaign farmer while you promote your Kale up to 5 stars and eventually 6 stars, or maybe even you skip working on Kale and work exclusively on Monkey King. Other champions might become available through promo codes. At some point in time, Monkey King may cease to be available in a promo code. But until then, try the code Monkey King. Once that no longer works, check websites such as hellhades.com or AumiLove. They often have a list of working codes, and you can pick whichever new player code you have. You have 72 hours to get a new player exclusive code, and don't delay on doing the Monkey King one if you can, because you only can use one of these exclusive bonus champion codes, and the rest of the codes are generally energy, which is fine, maybe a couple of extra brews or some other resource, but they're not going to be as good as getting you a legendary or even a good epic champion. Other things you can certainly pay attention to is early on, you are probably going to have more energy than you have max energy because you're going to be constantly making levels and getting bonus energy. Don't worry about throwing any extra energy into that other than from things such as your daily quests, where you have to claim these before the end of the day or else you lose out on them. So if you have other places you can get energy, for example, this Arbiter Call the Arbiter stuff, you can share the trailer here. You don't even have to actually share it, but you can click on that to share it. and get this extra 100 energy. And there is a bunch of energy you can get here, and this will help you advance. But it's not doing you any good if you've maxed out here, because if you're not, if you, as soon as you're not maxed out there, you start regenerating energy. So you are wasting a little bit of energy if you collect that all to start with. That doesn't mean it's the worst thing to do, but you probably should focus on using as much energy as you can and then start pulling from alternate sources once you've gotten down to under your max energy. One of the cool things that I believe they've added recently is this silver pack. So you'll get a bunch of extra silver bonus, which is great because silver is very, very precious early on. Be careful with what gear you roll up and what gear you invest in, as well as how high you invest your gear. Because using silver is irreversible, and if you roll up a piece of gear and it's not good and you end up having to sell it, you've wasted some of that silver. Getting something to +4 or +8, usually not a big deal. And in fact, +8 is usually where you can sell gear and make what you invested into it back. If you go higher than +8, it will become more and more expensive to roll the gear up. Specifically, going to +16 is not very good early on until you get absolutely amazing pieces of gear. So good 5-star speed boots, for example, good 5-star gloves, maybe even good 4-star gloves, some of the good starter gear that you get from the lifesteal path when you get the initial login stuff. Those can be very good pieces of gear to invest in early. But most 4-star gear, you're not going to want to take above +12, and you're probably going to want to avoid rolling just about any piece of gear over +8 early on, unless you know it's a good piece. Trust that things like crit rate gloves and speed boots are going to be gold early on, as well as things like any particular piece of equipment with accuracy, speed, crit rate will be very critical early on. Once you unlock the market, you'll have a chance to buy mystery shards and possibly even ancient shards from the market. Don't worry about opening up the market unless you start getting those ancient shards there. Otherwise, focus on saving your gems up to be able to buy masteries early on, to be able to use it for energy. There's all kinds of ways you can use your gems that are going to be better than opening the market. Same with silver. But eventually, you'll be using a lot of these mystery shards. Mystery shards are great. You want to build up a bunch of them. You will be pulling a ton of champions as well. Don't be afraid to use your mystery shards to give yourself some extra champions. Other resources to be aware of, as I pointed out earlier, we have the Call of the Arbiter series. There's a couple of energy pieces you can get from there. You have these missions you'll eventually unlock right here. These can be additional resources you can get by completing them, so pay attention to them. And they're worth looking at and completing as early as possible, particularly because eventually some of these you will bypass so far that it doesn't make sense to go back for them. So this is extra energy I could earn. Here's some gems. Here's some silver. Here's some brews. I can eventually get 300 gems. That's a pretty huge pile. And a lot of these things are pretty easy. Summon 5 champions, pretty easy. Use 4 XP brews in the tavern. I can do that pretty easily. Equip a support champion with 4 life artifacts of level 4 or higher. Well, that's going to be difficult because I need to get those life artifacts. But once I have them, you can throw them on a champion. It doesn't even have to be a champion you're going to keep. Once it's done, it's done. So pay attention to these progress missions. Pay attention to these challenges, which will kind of direct you a little bit through the game. There's some good advice that these will give you. There's a couple things that are bad advice as well. But for the most part, you do these. Hey, there's that rare book I was talking about that I could use. Here's another rare book I could earn by doing some of these things. These specifically want me to farm stuff on normal on stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the first part of the campaign. That is much easier to do early on, where it is a waste of time to do later on. Now, most of this gear is probably just going to get sold, but it gives you a chance to farm some of this stuff, gives you a chance to level up some of your champions, both your starter and some food. And once you get some of the food leveled up, you might actually have a 4-star or a 5-star starter once you get out of this level and the next level as well. Again, you have dungeons you can do here as well. Don't rush to push these, but again, you can get a sacred shard or eventually a sacred shard. This is an ancient shard here. And you can do stuff in Arena as well. Do not ignore Arena. There's some good rewards for that, as well as the Great Hall is a great way to advance your account overall. So don't ignore Arena. Finally, one of the things that seems to be fairly new is that there is this apprentice pass that can pop up. Now, there's also a champion pass here. At the moment, they're giving away He-Man if you've got 5 weeks left. This is great for new players because this is a bunch of really good end game stuff. So these are 6-star accessories and 4-star glyphs and energy and bigger potions. This is all really good stuff up here for the top, and it's absolutely free. And this ham could be a huge, huge time saver in getting a champion up to 6 stars, especially if you decide to build your Monkey King first. And then you unlock this ham, and then you can put this ham into your starter Kale and bring Kale immediately up to 6 stars. And this is pretty easy to do. You log into the game, you use 500 silver, you use 100 energy, things you're going to do anyway, and you can make this in, I think, less than 10 days, you can make level 25. Meanwhile, this apprentice pass has daily challenges that's generally easy stuff to do. Win campaign battles, win a bunch of campaign battles, upgrade an artifact or an accessory. It has to be 1 attempt at upgrading it, so it's not a big deal. But there's also some apprentice challenges, and these will be whatever your starter is. But as you advance your starter, upgrade Kale's skills 3 times. Well, that's something I want to do anyway, and then it moves me further and further along. And these gives me extra chickens, which will make the journey to getting Kale to 6 stars or getting other champions to be able to make chickens from easier as well. So here's 3 3-star chickens. Here's a bunch of silver. Here's some books. Here is more 2-star chicken, or not 2-star, 4-star chickens. Here's some extra stuff to get Kale leveled up as well. You don't even need to bother farming the potion dungeons to get some decent gear. I've already gotten, if you look here, you get 6 pieces of 5-star lifesteal gear there. You'll get 6 more pieces of 5-star lifesteal there. It will be 1 of each piece. Hopefully they're good for you, and having 2 sets of 5-star lifesteal gear, even if it's not great, will be helpful on your account early. Finally, if you decide you want to spend a little bit of money, this bottom row here gives you a bunch of extra stuff and gives you a Rector Drath. It's $20. It's a decent deal, except for the fact that the code that I had started me with a Rector Drath in the first place. So from that end, I don't think I would spend $20 on a Rector Drath unless I was desperate for all of these materials as well. And if you decide to spend on the champion pass for like your He-Man, or if there's a different champion pass available when you're starting, that's fine. You're probably going to get a very good legendary, and a good legendary and even a bad legendary early on will help advance your account. So if you're going to become a hunter and you choose to spend on that, don't feel bad. If it helps your account now and speeds up your progress, that's great. So we're here in the tavern to talk a little bit about advancing champions. Your starter champion is very well worth investing in. He'll help you in faction wars. You'll probably need him in clan boss. You'll use him all over the place. And even if you get another champion that might be a good farmer, like a Monkey King, it's probably worth actually still investing in your starter champion. So I would dedicate your first couple of hours in the game, even a couple of days in the game, to leveling up to get your starter champion to 6-star or your campaign farmer to 6-star, and then you start working on other champions. I've got Rector Drath here because that came with this account when I logged in, and when I created it with using a code, that I will have a code for that down below. So if you want to start with a Rector Drath, you can use the code link down below and start an account. It helps support me, and it gets you a Rector Drath, who is a wonderful, wonderful champion early on. Rector Drath is a very good champion, a very good healer, will help carry your account for a long time. She can sit at a 4-star until you get 1 or 2 of your champions that are damage dealers up to 6 stars. And then you can start working on advancing her to keep everyone else alive. So focus on a couple of champions, advance those champions, and then focus on making chickens so you can advance those champions further on. Now you'll notice you'll get a couple of champions that are 1-star champions. The easiest thing to do with 1-star champions is to take a 1-star champion here. Let's actually get a 1-star champion. And I'm going to feed this 1-star champion 3 other champions and a brew of the correct color. And that brings them to level 10. I can now upgrade them to level 10. Throw another champion in here. And I've now ranked him up to level 2. Now that he's ranked 2, now he's worth running through campaign and getting experience on, till eventually I get a couple of them to 20. Once they get to 20, I will give them a bunch of chickens, a bunch of other 2-star champions, and they will become a 3-star champion. Then I will use those to feed to Kale and make him a 4-star champion once he hits level 30, and then I will continue that process on and on until I get a 6-star champion. 2-star champions are worth running through campaign. Eventually they will not be, but early on they are. 1-star champions, it's not worth running them through campaign. You're better off just feeding them 3 other 1-star champions in a brew and making them a 2-star. So the key to farming and leveling up these champions in campaign is you want a champion who can run solo and carry these other 3 champions through the floor. So Monkey King has got some gear on him. He's already a 5-star, which means he's already well ahead of the curve, and he can run through campaign. He's also in lifesteal gear, so he should be able to keep these. Whether or not he keeps them alive, it doesn't matter. He should be able to keep himself alive and clear out most of these champions here. So as we're running through this floor, it may take 30 seconds, it may take a minute, that's fine. But as you'll see, he's got plenty of HP, he's killing things pretty regularly, and he's not really in danger. So he is set up to be a campaign farmer, which means I'm running him and leveling up the other 3 champions as fast as possible. And I like actually trying to keep all 3 of the champions that I'm leveling up at the same level and the same rank, just so that I know that once I'm done with all 3 of these champions, and then I've got 3 equal level chickens. You don't have to do that. I just find it particularly easy to do it that way. And as far as which floor you should be farming, for the most part, you want to advance as far as you can in campaign where you can run something like this, and then that's what you run. So you can get further in campaign with a 2-sum, 3-sum, or 4-sum, that's fine. But you want to find a floor that you can farm with just your Sun Wukong or just your starter champion, and then you can use that to level up some chickens. And as you start leveling up chickens, your other champions will probably level up too. Maybe you'll earn some silver to level up some of the gear that they have, if that's worth leveling up. And you can eventually start farming harder and harder stages. Your final goal to farm is probably going to be 12-3 in Brutal. That is probably the best place to farm for XP for energy in the game outside of Nightmare Campaign. And farming Nightmare Campaign is not something you're going to be doing for a long time, if ever. It's generally not worth it even for endgame players. One of the things you need to be aware of is that champion skills need to be booked. Now you'll see here I've got Kale has gotten 2 books into his 3rd skill. These are random. You don't get to pick, unfortunately. But what you want to make sure that you do is you do not want to use epic or legendary books, or even mythical books if you happen to get one, on your rare champions. You want to use the lowest book you can use on any champion you're going to book. And that is because early on, even rare books are going to be hard to get. But epic books are going to be very hard to get, and the epic champions are going to generally be better than your rares, so you're going to want to book them. So if you waste your epic books on your rare champion, you've wasted some resources. Legendary books are going to be even harder for you to get early on, so you don't want to waste them on a rare champion or even an epic champion. And mythicals are darn near impossible to get, especially early on. So don't use books that are higher rarity than the champions you're putting them into. It might be tempting to advance quickly, but there's other things that are available that can give you additional resources for books and stuff like that. One of the things that you're going to struggle with is masteries. Masteries are a way to power up your champions that gives them additional abilities, additional stats, and they're very, very powerful, and they can make a huge difference early on. You can certainly farm the Minotaur dungeon. It works very well, other than the fact that farming the lower level stages is a waste of energy versus farming stage 15. So you want to farm stages that are not stage 15 as little as possible. So what I recommend doing is if you go into your champions here, Go into the Masteries over here, and the Masteries, you can see these Masteries tree here and take a look at what Masteries you might pick. And some of these are nice. Plus 5 crit rate's good, plus 10% crit damage is very helpful. Eventually, something like War Master is great because that adds a ton of extra damage, particularly for something like Clan Boss. You can also get some extra accuracy. You can extend the duration of debuffs that you place. There's all kinds of really good things you can get from your Masteries. They help add a ton of damage and a ton of viability to your champions, and they're worth adding on your best champions. But because they can be expensive and they're difficult to farm early on, it is probably best to take whichever is going to be your main campaign farmer and spending these 800 gems to buy Masteries for your first champion or your second champion. Once you have 2 champions that have Masteries, maybe only 1, but I'd recommend 2, then you can work on farming Minotaur. And once you get a team of 5 champions you know you want to build into, they're kind of locked in, you're getting most of them to 6-star as you can start leveling them up by farming their Masteries in Minotaur, getting yourself some additional XP, some additional silver, and of course the extra Mastery scrolls that you need to power them up. But the first 1 or 2, I would recommend just flat out buying with gems. Otherwise, farming level 15, it's around 540 gems per champion to max them out. Now, you're spending more gems than you might want to otherwise, and that amount of gems can certainly vary a little bit. But just getting 1 or 2 champions to the max level of Masteries will be a huge power boost. And the fact that it will save you a ton of time farming Minotaur later is well worth the extra gems early on. Finally, one of the more important things to do when you're playing a new count is to pace yourself. Progression is going to feel like it comes fast, and then it's going to feel like it's slow. You're going to be doing a lot of things that can be tedious early on. Eventually, they will get easier. They will get faster. You will eventually get past the things that are blocking you. This is a marathon. Raid is a grind. Raid is a marathon. It is a long game. It takes time to build your account. It takes time to earn things. It takes time to unlock champions. It takes time to eventually build an account that will get to the end of everything. But with patience and time, and you don't have to spend, you can grind and get yourself a wonderful raid account. It's just going to take a little bit of time early on. So be patient and don't burn yourself out. Yes, it might be tempting to say, look at all this energy I have. I better use it until I have no more energy. But that's going to be very difficult to do early on because you're going to be constantly making new levels. So if you feel you need to step away for a little bit to take a break, do it. It's healthier for you. It's healthier for the game long term for you to occasionally take a break and then come back when you're still finding something interesting. And if you have to walk away occasionally, you can do things like use your auto battles. So you get auto battles here in the game if you start here. So if I know I want to farm this particular location, I might put in a couple of champions I want to run auto battles with and hit multi-battle and then run those auto battles, and then I can walk away for a little bit. So that's another way you can pace yourself by doing some stuff automatically and walking away. Ultimately, much like instant progress, you're also not going to play the count twice the same way. What will eventually happen as you start pulling shards, you will get interesting and new champs that will be different than a previous account. So if you've played this before, your account is going to look different than the previous account you played. If you've never played this before, your account is going to look different than your friend who started at the same time, because eventually you're going to start to pull different champions. You're going to start to get different gear. You're going to get lucky or unlucky as it could be and get some cool stuff, hopefully. And that cool stuff will change how you play. And that's fine. That's actually part of the fun part of Raid. And that's why there's a lot of people that run second, third, fourth accounts. They love the variety and they love the chance to play a new account where the challenges are going to be different, because not only might I get different champs early, but as the game has progressed, new things have come into the game to make the early playing experience easier for people, to make it faster, such as the Apprentice Pack certainly helps speed up quite a bit. And overall, there are new champions in the game. So you might pull a champion early on that you've never used because you didn't have to because they weren't worthwhile late game. So overall, just keep in mind, you can pace yourself. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And my final tip, which is not really a gameplay tip, but have some fun. It's a game. You should be having fun playing the game. Progress is fun. Unlocking new things is fun. There's a lot of fun to be had in playing the game. If you're not having fun, maybe set it down a little bit and try a little bit later. That's fine. And to be fair, some things will get occasionally tedious. That's fine too. But that happens with a lot of games. And the end result, hopefully, is you're continuing to ultimately have fun when you're playing. I always say we're having fun talking Raid Shadow Legends because I want to remind you guys that this is a game and you're here to have fun. So remember that, have some fun, enjoy Raid, and if you're not enjoying Raid, then maybe Raid isn't the game for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. But hopefully you found these tips helpful. I have a bunch of basic and beginner guides. I have some advanced guides as well. I make videos regularly. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe button if you want to see more content like that. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Hopefully you are enjoying Raid, and hopefully you're going to stick around for a while. And if you ever need any help, well, I'm Bront CatHerder, and I'm throwing videos up all the time that hopefully will help you advance your account. So until the next video, I'll see you then.